Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can everyone present hear me, especially those who are viewing remotely? Members unable to join us physically at this location are able to join us remotely. However, they will not be able to vote and their attendance won't be officially recorded, although their virtual attendance will be recorded in the minutes. This evening meeting is held at Newham Town Hall. I would like to welcome members of the public and press who are physically attending or watching on YouTube. With regards to meeting etiquette, members of the council, please can I ask that you indicate that you wish to speak by raising your physical hands if you're present or your virtual hands if you are viewing remotely. Please can everyone be mindful of each other and please observe sensible etiquette to help us reduce the spread of COVID. For this meeting, we will be aided by Roger and Ben. This meeting of the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee is now called to order. Item 1, I welcome you all to this evening meeting, both physically present and those virtual. Apologies for absence. Is there any member wishing to apologize? Roger, have we got
any apologies, Chair?
No apologies. Okay. Members, is there anyone apologizing for this meeting? No. So Roger, you will note that there's no apologies for absence. Declaration of interest. Is there any members wishing to declare any interests? Roger, you will note that no members wishing to declare any interests. Minutes. The minutes of our last meeting dated 29th of November 2022 can be found in the supplementary agenda. I move as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 29th of November. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Higgins.
I was going to suggest a change, but I might be too early on that.
Okay. Well, this is the time if you want to.
Okay.
Yes.
So on the very bottom of big page 8, it says, responding to some concerns raised by committee members in the delay until October 23 on the proposals to work with residents and Transport for London on accessible streets. I think that's referring to my question about the delay in 20-mile-per-hour roads. And I think that would be a lot clearer if it said that it was about the 20-mile-per-hour borough-wide plan and the October 23 date for that.
Colleagues, do we agree to that amendment? Okay, Roger, the commission agreed to that amendment. Okay, now do I have a seconder?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Charlotte, second the minutes. Thank you. I will now move on to item 5, the work program. The agenda for each meeting will continue to be discussed with proposal brought forward. I propose the following items for the next meeting. 1, question and answer session with the cabinet member for sustainable transport and environment. That's Councillor Asser. Community assemblies and sales spend update from the 29th of November meeting, and that's Councillor Charlene McLean. And intervention being made to help sex workers in the borough, and that will be Councillor Wilson. Is there any comment on the program for the next overview meeting? Is that noted?
Noted.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 6, substantive item for this meeting. The purpose of this item is to adopt the Budget Working Commission's report and refer it to Council and Cabinet. The process for reviewing the proposal by the executive for the upcoming budget for 2023-24 has been conducted by the Budget Working Commission between November 2022 and February 2023. Committee would discuss the draft report attached to the supplementary agenda. The committee would look to agree the recommendation and finalize the report to submit to the upcoming cabinet, which takes place on the 16th of February. Before we go on, I would like to say a few words, especially for the viewing public. As joint chair of the commission, I would give some opening remarks about the Budget Working Commission's report and recommendation and address the meeting about the process regarding the work of the Budget Working Commission over the past few months. Colleagues, due to matter which I am not at liberty to discuss at this point in time, I took the decision early in phase 2 of the Commission's inquiry to suspend the holding of oral evidence session with the executive. The Commission has, therefore, produced a truncated report regarding the Council finances and executive provisional draft budget proposals. The report focused on priority areas identified during the Commission's first phase and draw on written submissions received during phase 2. Its area of focus are the Council's financial sustainability and resilience, housing and temporary accommodation, agency staffing, the dedicated school grant, and the NEWM Sparks program. The Commission makes 10 recommendations regarding these areas. The Commission has not reviewed the executive final budget because Cabinet has pushed back its meeting by 1 week. However, Overview and Scrutiny Committee reserves the right to convene to scrutinize the final budget proposals. The Commission's first and foremost concern is a Council's sustainability and financial resilience. At Q3, the Council is forecast to overspend its budget by 5.9 million and only owes 7.1 million in the general fund reserve, which has not increased this year as planned due to the £3 million being used to meet this year's pay award. The 5.9 million overspend would be higher, but for the use of earmark reserves to support the revenue budget. The Commission recommends that the use of reserves be more clearly reported. Having reflected on economic forecasts and the lessons of COVID-19 pandemic, the Commission also recommends that the Council increase its planned general fund reserve contribution by a further £1 million in 2023-24 to compensate for the use of reserve this year, and redirect policy growth to compensate for any further use of reserve by year end. 5.65 million of the forecast overspend is against the Council's budget for supporting and temporarily accommodating homeless residents. The Council has a high number of households in temporary accommodation due to historic mismanagement of homelessness in an inhospitable housing market, and during the period of high inflation, our residents are increasingly at risk of homelessness and are increasingly becoming so due to the lack of affordable and suitable housing in the borough. Moreover, those key drivers of homelessness, the increased cost of insufficient supply of housing, are also driving increased costs for the Council's temporary accommodation service. The provisional draft budget contains significant investment in service to enable it to meet increased cost and demand and to restructure and enhance its homelessness and temporary accommodation service under a single homelessness response program. However, there is a risk to the success of the program due to the limited funding proposal for it. Therefore, the Commission recommends that by next municipal year, the Council submit to Overview and Scrutiny Committee a smart action plan with intended outcome for the program. This does not necessarily need to be considered formally. The Commission ordered that increasing the minimum period for which a person must have been resident in the borough to be owed a housing duty has reduced demand for temporary accommodation. A majority of members would support a further increase to the requirements, and the Commission has recommended accordingly. But this has led to the production. Sorry, colleagues. The Commission has been unable to understand whether the full implication of decanting Victoria Street, which provides 216 income-generating low-cost temporary accommodation units during the housing crisis, were known when the commitment to do so was made, and therefore recommend that commitment and decision financial implication should be informed by professional assessment and advice and involve consideration of all of their implications and alternative options. An area of high cost and thus opportunity is the council agency spend. The council has a limit of 624 agency workers, but has exceeded this and spend $3 million on agency staff every month. The Commission also believes that the data proposed reported to it only include agency workers engaged on the single set of arrangements, and therefore recommend that beginning in the next financial year, data on all indirectly employed staff be included in budget monitoring reports and provided on request to Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The Commission also recommends that the Council should set feasible targets for indirectly employed staff and smart action plan to deliver them. The Commission is concerned by the undefined funding requirements to deliver the Newham Sparks program, which will be initiated by funding proposal in the provisional draft budget. It therefore recommends that a comprehensive and fully costed program scope the delivery plan, including smart outcome measures for Newham Spark, and that all of its work streams be produced and published before any budget proposal to deliver the program or its work streams are brought forward. The committee is asked to adopt the Commission's report and recommend and submit them to Cabinet and the Council. So, colleagues, at this stage, does anyone wish to make any comments before I go further? Councillor Trotter.
Chair, are we discussing the recommendations in the report or general discussions?
Any general discussion before I go?
Then we'll go recommendation by recommendation.
The general discussion, and then we would then go into the rest of the report. I would only set aside a short time, no more than 10 minutes.
That's fine. Chair, thank you for that most comprehensive overview. What I would say is that, and we don't need to rehearse the issues, but I feel very concerned that this whole process was truncated for the reasons we can't go into at the moment. And I would have liked us to consider in future years that we have external witnesses here, because this, whilst you quite rightly said, this is a budget that impacts on the council, it also impacts on our partner agencies. And I'm thinking here particularly of the civil society and the third sector. So I would just like that noted, that we haven't been able to actually do as much as we would have liked, as for the reasons you've stated. And that's unfortunate.
Thank you. And when you suggesting independence, can you elaborate?
I'm suggesting there's organisations that are funded by the council at the moment that are from civil society, voluntary and community organisations that we've invested in and are central to us achieving some of our objectives going forward.
Yeah, thank you. That's noted. Councillor Masters?
I'd like to make a further point along the same lines that owing to the truncated process, we haven't really been able to delve into the impact of the efficiencies. I mean, it's all very well talking about making savings through efficiencies, but as we know through sad experience in previous years, some of these efficiencies can end up having sort of unforeseen consequences for the residents. And so that's my deep regret about our process this year.
I fully agree with you, Councillor Masters, on that. And I've seen Councillor Watson and then Councillor Higgins.
Just to follow up on what Councillor Cheddar and Councillor Marcus has said, it is regretful that we've had a truncated process. We haven't been able to review the second part of the budget. The most material area has been children's services, adult services, and a detailed discussion of temporary accommodation. More worryingly, I'm always more interested in the big numbers. And the biggest number that this council actually spends on the capital programme housing. The economic climate has got worse over the last 12 months. Rates have increased. Production cost inflation is higher than retail prices there. And I think that's had a detrimental effect upon the future viability of certain housing projects that we haven't been able to do. So that's a big risk area that we haven't been to review due to circumstances beyond our control. And I think that ought to be minuted, because if the affordable housing programme goes wrong, it goes wrong big time. And I wouldn't want anyone to say that we haven't reviewed that. And the reason that we haven't been able to review that is because of the truncated budget review process.
Yeah, Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. Coming into this process of budget working commission, one of the reasons why I applied to be part of the commission and was excited to was because of the manifesto commitment that this would be the first green budget. And I was really interested in going into what that meant. And this point is made in the report, but I felt it worth highlighting in the meeting that because of the truncated process, we weren't able to assess the manifesto commitment in the proposed budget. And that's such a shame, because this is, labelled the council's first green budget. And that gave us this opportunity to say, okay, so what does that involve? What decisions have you made that are different than before? How does that shape your priorities? And we weren't able to have those conversations with the administration. And I think that that's one of the big misses in this process, sadly.
Okay. Yeah, I would close it there, because I said about 10 minutes. I think we have exhausted the 10 minutes or so. Okay, so thank you. What I will now do is to move for the adoption of this report. Does committee agree to adopt and submit the Budget Working Commission's report and recommendation to the executive?
Chair, may I suggest that, following on from Councillor Hudson's point about the lack of scrutiny over temporary accommodation in particular, that actually, and because it is such a big part of the spend of the council, that actually we take some time to take temporary accommodation budget, the issues around Victoria Street and residency back to a scrutiny commission.
Okay. Right, and there's a recommendation that speaks to this, and it's recommendation 5. Is there any other member?
Chair, if I may just, I think recommendation 5 speaks to part of the issue,
Yes.
but we need a fuller discussion. And that's why I would say the whole discussion around temporary accommodation, residency and Victoria Street needs to be revisited.
Okay. Right, I see Councillor Booker. And what I'm going to ask is the clerk to read recommendation 5 for us. But Councillor Booker, if you get that ready, then yes.
I was just wondering whether we had a form of words that we could replace recommendation 5 with.
So first of all, we're going to read the existing recommendation 5 before we come up with any set of words that we might find useful. Ben, are you able to assist us in reading recommendation 5? Thank you very much.
I will just open the report, Chair.
Yeah.
Recommendation 5 of the report reads: the minimum continuous residency requirement in the housing allocation scheme should be increased to 5 years when the scheme is next reviewed, and such a review should be initiated as soon as practicable.
Yeah. So before we go to a set of words, we should have a debate, no more than 10 minutes or so. Then we will see if we can get a set of words coming out of that. Is there anyone who wants to kick that off? No one has caught my eyes yet. Councillor Higgins, Councillor Booker. Councillor Higgins for us.
Yeah, sure.
Eyes.
Thank you. The recommendation as it stands, I understand why members of the Budget Working Commission felt it important to propose a potential solution to the problem in temporary accommodation. Its contribution to the council's difficulties in its budget performance in the last year are obvious in any reading of the budget, and a solution is necessary. Owing to the truncated process that we've referred to before, I don't personally feel that the issue with temporary accommodation or this particular proposal has had enough consideration at this point. I don't remember an opportunity where we were presented with the possible pros and cons of doing this. I'm not entirely sure how we ended up on 5 versus any other number. And I think that a recommendation that could have this sizable of an impact on residents deserves consideration, such that if that decision is eventually reached, as members of the council, when we're asked why this is happening, we have all of the information we need to defend that decision and to say, actually, this isn't only going to have a negative impact on some people, but the overall impact could be positive, for example. I don't know if that's what's going to happen if this change is made. Obviously, this is a scrutiny committee. We're not actually making this decision. But if we're going to recommend that the administration take this decision, I think we need to be confident of what the consequences are. And I don't personally feel that I am. And similarly to what Councillor Charter said, the problem as a whole deserves deeper consideration. This is one possible solution, but it's not going to solve the problem in and of itself. And I think that we could consider this more deeply in a open, especially considering that budget has been a private process. If we have the open meetings where officers can discuss what might happen, we have reports, we have the evidence, I think that we would benefit from that.
Thank you. And what I should have said, 2 minutes per person. I'm going to stop you. I'm going to give you a 30 seconds warning. Councillor Booker.
Thank you. I would support Chad's suggestion to the recommendation. I think that it's a good idea to go to another scrutiny committee, because we haven't had the opportunity to ask the relevant questions, and also we don't have the resources to really look in depth at this issue to decide whether 5 years is the correct amount of time. And so rather than making a policy decision with slightly blind, I think it's a good idea for us to look at it in more depth, and so I would agree with her recommendation.
Well, thank you, Councillor Utson.
Yeah, I think we need to look at this in context. We've got 35,000 people on the waiting list. We only allocate around about 600 properties a year. I suspect that the cost, the total cost of managing and allocating those properties is £3 million. So you're talking spending £3 million, we hire 4 or 5 to allocate 600 properties. So I suspect that we are going to have to look at this. You may have to go to overview scrutiny, or you may have to go to a regen committee. But it is regrettable that because of the process, we didn't have the opportunity to interrogate people in housing about the cost of the allocation system and whether the residents of the London Borough of Newham are actually getting value for money for just allocating 600 properties a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Masters, minutes.
For me, this is about transparency and managing resident expectations. As a councillor, I frequently have my residents coming to me and saying, you know, I've been on the list, you know, beyond the residency requirement. When am I going to get my council flat? And the reality, sadly, while we have right to buy and really unhelpful central housing lack of strategy from the ruling national government, is that they will almost certainly not get access to social housing owing to the extra qualifications that other people on that waiting list might have. I think the Commission did receive solid evidence that from other London boroughs that an increase in the housing allocation scheme would have a positive effect, and it would have the effect of giving residents a more realistic estimation of whether they're likely to receive social housing or not. But for me, I would support equally taking the issue to a scrutiny, because it may well be that a 5-year residency requirement isn't enough, and a higher residency requirement could actually have better impact and lead to a more positive estimation of housing strategies to address this appalling situation. So on to that level, I would support what Councillor Charter was talking about.
Thank you. Can I say, I just did some sums, and if we freeze the waiting list now, with only 600 properties or so that comes available every year, it would take us 58 years to house everyone who needs a property. 58. So if I'm on that list, I will be dead by then. So I'll never get my house. So we do need to look at this. One of the things is that with the 3 years or so that it is now, it's not sustainable. We don't have the number of properties, and we do not have the money. Right now, it's costing us an extra £1 million every month to house the homeless population within this borough. £1 million, that is overspending. That is money we don't have. We don't have the property we don't have. So we have to do something. And though unpopular it may be, that's why the people elected us, to lead and to take tough decisions. Though unpopular it may be, we have to take the decisions to up the years of residency to make certain. And some of those people who've been 10, 15 years on the list and desperately need a property, and if we don't do something now, they may go on to 20 or up, and then eventually until they no longer need a property because their kids might have grown up in overcrowding situations, etc. I think we need to, and let's face it, as a politician, I suppose I can say this, there's boroughs outside, and other boroughs in London who place their residents in Newham, and eventually these very residents become resident in the borough because they've been here for umpteen years or so, and eventually they become a part of our waiting list also, and they had extra pressures and burden. I think the residency criteria should be raised, and one of the dangers of sending it to another committee for detailed consideration is that we may get 7 years. And that's, I'm not saying we might, 10 years, who knows? So that is one of the dangers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I just want to thank you for your maths, because I think what you did with that was you injected a healthy dose of realism into this debate. I think being a councillor, there are many times where we look at things and say in a perfect world, in an ideal world, we would like it to be so. Unfortunately, for those who actually are in power and actually run the borough, they have to do it with reality. And unfortunately, reality is not always lined up with what our dreams and aspirations would have. So I just want to say thank you very much for that, because I think it really hammered home just the scale of the challenge that faces this borough in terms of the amount of people that need housing, the amount of resource that we have, and what can we actually do to make sure that it's shared out fairly. I'd also like to make a small recommendation in terms of where this goes to. Being chair of the Regeneration Housing Environment Scrutiny Committee, I'm acutely aware that we do not have much resource. I have 2 meetings left this municipal year. This is a very weighty issue that covers many actually different scopes and different areas in actual fact, because like you said, there are other boroughs who are placing people in Newham. There's our own response to it, our policies. There's also the actions that our council has taken, whether to make this better or worse. There's a whole host of things. And to be fair, inside my committee, there is just no scope for that. So I would actually recommend that we have a task and finish group set up on this if the council will give the resources to do that. And we can look at it properly, interrogate it properly as a standalone item and give it due care and attention that I think it deserves. So thank you.
And I think we can then include everything that Councillor Charter was saying. If we take it to a task and finish, I'm not saying we agree in that now, but it's something for consideration, for you to consider whether we should do task and finish on it. Okay, so having said that, do we agree to look at this again, to depart from the established recommendation 5, to have it go back to a commission to look at it along the lines that Councillor Lee Parkway is saying?
Chair, can I just make sure that it's about the problem in temporary accommodation as a whole and not only what the minimum continuous residency requirement should be?
Yeah. So you want to widen the scope?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Councillor Lee Parkway.
Yeah, there's a long-established convention in the council that we don't double up on work because of resources, and obviously we're quite keen to make sure that we don't use resources that have been put aside, etc. We've actually looked at temporary accommodation already. That's something that's come up in my commission. We've looked at it already. I know we've obviously had it come to overview so this is something that we've actually done in its entirety, looking at temporary accommodation. Are you asking for us to go and rehash the work that's already been done, or what's your recommendation?
Well, so we've looked at temporary accommodation in Budget Working Commission, and as part of a proposed solution to that, we've come up with this idea of increasing the minimum continuous residency requirement. I'm not party to any other, I'm not on regen scrutiny. Haven't been involved in any other discussions. It feels like there could be other. I'm not saying that scrutiny, that this task and finish group wouldn't come up with the same recommendation. I'm just saying that we should give it permission to come up with further recommendations as well, not just looking at this one specific policy.
Yeah, Councillor Charter.
Are you referring to recommendations on the residency requirement or broader in scope?
I think broader in scope.
I understand where you're coming from. My only suggestion, my only fear about that is how long's a piece of string? And I think what's coming out of this report, following on from what you're saying, is that the two standout features in temporary accommodation are Victoria Street and the residency. So my proposal would be that we take those two issues only back to the task and finish group or the scrutiny commission and just do a very focused piece of work on those to inform our thinking in the future.
I definitely understand why that would be helpful.
Okay, so Should, Councillor Lee Parkway.
Yeah, I would like to support Councillor Chandler's proposition. I would like to support that wholeheartedly. And I would like to say to Councillor Higgins that all of the meetings are public. As chair of the committee, if you ever ask as a member, could you come and sit in on the committee? They're public. You're more than welcome to come along. So I think this insistence that, you know, you've not played a part, etc., they're all on YouTube. You're more than welcome to come along anytime to my committee. That's an open invitation to you. Please do come and see what we're talking about, because to be fair, we have covered this quite extensively in my commission. Thank you, Chair.
And for the benefit of Councillor Higgins, I know that you're not on, but Councillor Lee Parkway is correct. And most of the chair, although you're not a member of the commission, if you ask kindly, most of the chair will give you speaking rights. So do you want to have voting rights? So most chair will give you speaking rights if you want to ask a question or so of the commission.
Thank you, Chair.
So set of wordings then. So there's two things I'm going to ask this committee to decide on. First is going to be the set of wording, and secondly, whether we agree to send it to a task and finish. Yeah. Okay. So the set of wordings, have we, Ben, have you been scribing a set of wordings, given what you've heard? Have you come up with anything?
Yes, I think so. There was something about Victoria Street there at the end, which I didn't quite get though.
So Rita, do you want to? Yes.
I mean, as a suggestion, so overview and scrutiny or the relevant scrutiny commission should carry out an investigation into the problem of the temporary accommodation budget. This should include Victoria Street and the implications of increasing the residency. And I would suggest both the advantages and disadvantages of that.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just waiting for Ben to get that order together and then read it to us.
So, Chair, the potential recommendation could be that an appropriate scrutiny body conduct a review of solutions to temporary accommodation overspending, including but not limited to Victoria Street and the likely impact of increasing the minimum continuous residency requirements in the housing allocation scheme.
Okay, the likely impact, but what it doesn't say, because the recommendation was proposed in the 5 years, what you're asking there is the likely impact of it. But I think some way it should be there looking at increasing, because that is what the recommendation is speaking to, increasing it from what it is now. And I don't want to lose that in that recommendation.
So you could just add to the end of it. So it's the likely impact of increasing the minimum continuous residency requirement in the housing allocations scheme from 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be left more open than that?
I think it should be left more open. Now that we've revisited, it should be left more open.
And I think what Councillor Chatter said about the advantages or disadvantages,
That is
that language would be important to include.
so we're going to looking at increasing it upwards of 5 years or thereabout. Okay, so okay. So we just wait for Ben to make those corrections and then we come back to this.
So that's an appropriate scrutiny body conduct a review of solutions to temporary accommodation overspending, including the advantages and disadvantages of increasing the minimum continuous residency requirement in the housing allocation scheme and Victoria Street.
Okay. So that's a clear set of recommendation now. So we haven't lose the point of increasing for those of us who think it should increase, and it still are for those who think. So it has something there for everyone to look at. Is that agreeable?
Agreed.
Great.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. And in terms of a task and finish, do we agree to recommend that this go to task and finish commission? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. So can I just say something? One of the things that colleagues have picked up this evening and throughout the process is that sometimes when some of these recommendations come up, we should be in a position to fully cross them and to do our own research and so on. And I suppose because scrutiny does not have the necessary resources that it should have to carry out work, especially in budget work. Because if we're going to be doing some budgets and making recommendations, etc., we've been in a very strong position. If we're able to say to the executive, it would cost you X if you do this, and these are the impact assessment, and these are the benefits if you do Y. As it is, the time given to us is too short, and the resource, we do not have the research capability to do some of these work. And I would urge the executive, as I know you're listening, that we are given the resource necessary for scrutiny to be able to do some independent research of its own, especially when it comes to budget alternatives. Because if we're able to do that, we will not only make recommendations, but we can cause those recommendations and we can speak about what impact it will have on our residents without depending on the executive to tell us that. And that would be a proper functioning constructive scrutiny. That's what I need to say on this matter. So thank you. Now, I move back to the substantive question that I put before. Does the committee agree to adopt and submit the Budget Working Commission report and recommendation to the executive?
Great.
Great.
Okay, and that's unanimous. That's and Ben?
I think as the committee, excuse me, has resolved to establish a task and finish group regarding temporary accommodation budgets, should also resolve to remove recommendation 5 from the Budget Working Commission report.
Okay, and thank you for reminding us. So we've agreed to remove recommendation 5.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it will then replace with the recommendation that we've just adopted.
Yep.
And I thought that goes without saying that falls and the new recommendation takes its place.
I think as it's the committee establishing a task and finish group, it's not actually a recommendation which needs to go to the executive. So
No, that is, yeah. Okay, so for the viewing public, it is Overview and Scrutiny Committee that established task and finish. So it is our prerogative to decide that it's we set up a task and finish. And in terms of the recommendation, the existing recommendation that was there, that falls when we agree the new recommendations. So we now have a new recommendation 5 that we have adopted earlier.
Could we just include a note in that section of the report just to say that we have decided to do this, so that when the report goes to the executive, they understand that the decisions are linked?
What decisions?
As in that we have decided to launch a task and finish group to further consider this.
At
the end of the temporary accommodation section, we could just say.
It will be in the minutes.
Sure.
It will be in the minutes, and it's a decision that this committee has agreed. And we've agreed to set up a task and finish.
Okay.
And so therefore that will become part of our scrutiny work. And I suppose it will now be in the next municipal year, given where we are at. Yeah. Thank you. Now we move to item 7 and of the agenda, and that is appointment. And we have appointment to announce. And I propose that Councillor Simon Rush be appointed to the Education, Children and Young People Scrutiny Commission. Is that noted?
Noted.
Okay. Forward plan, key decisions, item 8. Is there any member wishing to raise any item regarding the forward plan? No? Okay, item 9. The date of our next meeting. The date of our next meeting is 16th of February. And that would be discussing the item I mentioned earlier in item 5, which would be the topic. And before I conclude this.
Chair, I just had a question about the meeting on the 16th of February. I've noticed that the question and answer session with Councillor James Asser is the last item on the work plan here for that meeting. I don't know if that implies an order of the agenda for that day, but from a personal perspective, we've been waiting for that question and answer session for quite a while now due to unfortunate events that happened in September and other ongoing events. I have quite a few questions I'd like to ask, and I think other members do as well. And I just want to make sure that when it comes to building the agenda for that meeting, that there is enough time set aside for it, and it's not sort of just stuck on the end of the meeting.
The management of the meeting would be agreed by the chairs.
Mhm.
We would note your concern because all four of us are sitting here, so your requests. And yeah, we've heard your requests.
Thank you, Chair.
And the chairs will decide the order of the agenda. What I've done though is put an extra half an hour to the meeting. So rather than 2 hours, we have 2.5 hours. Yeah. And as I was going to say, thank you all, colleagues who sat, because some of you who are sitting here sat in the Budget Commission, and for the splendid work that you have done. It wasn't an easy task. We got there in the end. So thank you very much for the work that you've done in the Budget Commission. In fact, for yourself, Nathan, for you, Elizabeth, it was your baptism of fire. And you held your own, and Rita too. Yes, Rita too. You've held your own in the process and made valid contribution. I think everyone worked together in a very collaborative and constructive way to come up with the report that we've come up. And I'm pleased that the report got the buy-in of everyone. And I know your emails were busy and your fingers were busy, whether it's by texts and emails and so on. So I appreciate the hard work that we've done, and I hope and the expertise that we've had amongst colleagues in the budget process. I hope it's one that we can carry forward, and members have that zeal and enthusiasm regarding the Council of Finance. I think it's a very good report in terms of shining light in areas that we wanted to shine light on, areas like the temporary accommodation, areas like the reserve and our financial positioning, and what we should do to make certain that we remain resilient in this tough economic time. And we all have played a part in coming up with the recommendations that we come up. And I hope the executive would pay attention. And I know they will because they're listening. My father would say, have I made a joke? Okay. I'm suggesting the chair. Okay, but that's all I would say at the interruption of laughter. Councillor Charter.
Chair, following on from those comments, could I also move a vote of thanks to our officer Ben for all his work on it as well? It's not been an easy.
Indeed, that goes without saying. I record today that Ben was so in tune with this when we all came with our different version, as he demonstrated this evening. We speak and he writes. And he came up with a set of words that is always acceptable to our side, depending on irrespective of what side of the debate you were on. He came up, and I suppose in some ways, he forged a kind of unity and consensus amongst us with this set of wording that he came up with. So thank you very much, Ben, for the work that you've done and for keeping us to compromise with a set of wording with your word skills. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. So with that, I call this meeting to close at exactly 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.